Okay, so last week I started talking about income inequality and redistribution of wealth. Okay, now this is a very general topic. Like inequality goes beyond just inequality of income, inequality of rights, privileges, way people are treated, but I'm going to discuss it mostly as if it's income inequality. And then the topic of redistribution, I'm going to talk about this as if it's redistribution of wealth, but many redistributive programs are not so much targeted as, might not be simply taking money from the wealthy directly to transfer to the poor. Though I did point out that the way the stimulus checks work is very much along those lines. But there are other ways in which income is redistributed. For example, the wealthy in general pay a larger share of their income in taxes. And then everyone might receive similar benefits from government expenditures. And so there's a way that people are made more equal. Okay, there are other programs that might target assistance toward economically disadvantaged people, and that's another form of reducing inequality, essentially redistributing wealth. Now, another topic along the same lines is redistributing or other policies that make people more equal in rights. Okay? So, for example, in the labor force, policies that reduce inequality between men and women, or in some ways, or the arguments that I give about redistribution of wealth could apply to policies that try to make the workforce more equal for men and women. Okay, so I started by outlining some arguments in favor of redistribution. Okay, so again, these arguments in favor I think the first one that I gave was a matter of, actually, I'm blanking now on the first one that I gave. Before public goods, there was, it will come back to me. Okay, one argument was the public good argument. Okay, that inequality is a public bad, a more just, more economically equal society is a better society for everyone involved. And so, there is the argument that it's a pure public good, which is on its own, it's a public good. It's nice. It makes us happy to live in a society that is equal. It gives us a warm and fuzzy feeling on the inside. But then there are also arguments like reduces property crime. Okay. If the government or society makes poor people less poor, they won't need to rob. If the government or society makes wealthy people less wealthy, then there will be fewer opportunities to rob. And reduces social unrest. In addition to crime, there's just unhappiness about inequality, right? If you have siblings, you understand this well. When your sibling gets some kind of treatment that you don't get, you dislike it. Yeah? And so people dislike the inequality in general. Okay, so here's the public good argument. Give me just a second to recall what was leading into this. I might be blanking. Okay. There is also an economic efficiency argument. That, for example, removing barriers to the workforce and so forth is good for the economy. Okay. It would be just simply bad for the economy if society arbitrarily decided that half of people are not allowed to work, or half of people you're going to be forced into jobs where you're not very productive. Okay, so what I'm thinking about is, for example, discrimination in the workforce against women. If women are prohibited from going into jobs where they can be as productive as they're capable of being productive, that's good for the economy. And to limit their job opportunities is bad for the economy. Okay, so, again, removing barriers is good for the economy. And, okay, then I came to a couple of social justice arguments. Now, before I do this, I want to go off on a little aside and talk about the idea of utilitarianism. Okay. Utility refers to the happiness, value, or usefulness of money. Usefulness of money. Or, in fact, we could say other goods, but for now I'm thinking about money. And this is a term used by economists and used by political philosophers. Okay, there is an idea that we call diminishing marginal utility of money. Diminishing marginal utility of money is the idea that money is worth more, or what, let me say, money is worth less to people who are wealthy. Okay. Then to people who are poor. Okay. So the wealthier a person is, the less value they get from extra money. Okay? Again, the wealthier a person is, the less value they get from extra money. And the technical term for that is marginal utility of money refers to how much value you get from a little more money. Okay, and it diminishes. The wealthier you are, the less extra value. So that's a translation. But the idea itself is worth knowing. And so I would like for you all to know this phrase. What is diminishing marginal utility of wealth? It's the idea that money is worth less to people who are wealthy. And that's the humor behind the cartoon of the billionaire lighting his cigar with a $1,000 bill. It means so little to that person. Or as I try to present it, imagine someone who's fantastically wealthy like Jeff Bezos, and we remove $1 million from his bank account. He'll never notice it. But we could use that money to give grants to 100 families, 100 desperately poor families of $10,000 each, and it would make a big difference in their lives. Like, that money has a lot of value to those poor people. This is simply starting with the idea of diminishing marginal utility of wealth, but then I'm moving in the direction of the utilitarian argument in favor of redistribution. Okay, so that is the idea of utilitarianism as a starting point, and then the utilitarian philosophy of government is that the government should maximize total utility. Total utility in society. So that's the role of the government. Again, a utilitarian would say this is what the government should do. Make society as happy as it can overall. And this is an important idea. I don't have time to teach a full course in political philosophy or a full course in poverty and inequality. I wish I could. Again, this idea goes back to about 1700, a philosopher named Jeremy Bentham, and it led to some other philosophers like John Locke and John Stuart Mill, suggesting that part of what this means is that people should be allowed to do whatever they like when they don't interfere with other people's lives. There's no way that the government can make you happier than you would make yourself on your own. And then that sort of led to, these ideas led to sort of American political philosophy, that the role of the government is not to, this might seem even weird to us, that in let's say about 1700, the role of the government was to fulfill God's intention of having the king be king. Okay? Sort of the divine right of kings. It's a really weird idea to us. Again, the role of the government is to make people happy. So, then the utilitarian would say one thing, or if you were to ask a utilitarian, should the government redistribute, the utilitarian argument for redistribution, utilitarian argument for redistribution is that you can increase total happiness. Okay, remember the technical term is utility, but I like happiness better. By taking money from people who value it little, and giving it to people who value the money more. Okay. Sound good? Okay. And again, think of my Jeff Bezos giving transfers to 100 families, money that he would never miss. Okay, so moving on. A different argument for social justice comes from a philosopher named John Rawls. And so this is known as the Rawlsian perspective on social justice. is that when asked to evaluate any policy, a person should, in order to make a fair decision, a person should take a step back and think, well, let's imagine I don't know who I will be in society. I could be anyone. Okay? Would I favor such and such policy? Okay, so, should, for example, and this can be applied to anything, should society provide, for people who are addicts, drug addicts, should society provide drug treatment? Okay, and for me right now, personally, I don't need that, and I don't want to pay for it. But if I were to think about, well, that's just because I'm fortunate and I'm not addicted to drugs. What if I had been born the addict? Or what if there were some chance I were born the addict? Sometimes I think, what if my kids were to turn into this person? What policy would I favor? And again, that's Rawls' perspective. He describes this as the original position, or from behind the veil of ignorance. Okay, you don't know yet who you will be in society. What policies would you favor? You could be born the rich person or the poor person. And if you take this perspective and add the idea of diminishing marginal utility of wealth, marginal utility of wealth or of money, then it implies that we would want a more equal society. Okay. And again, you can think of my example of Jeff Bezos and the poor people. If you were born, or if you don't know yet whether you will be born fantastically wealthy or dirt poor, would you want a policy that redistributes money? And so, you think, I could be born the person who has more money than I know what to do with. Or I could be born the person who is on the brink of being kicked out of my house and losing my car because I have no money. Would I favor taking money from my possibly rich self and giving it to my possibly poor self? And it's a little bit of a gamble, right? But because you could be, I guess, hurting yourself if you end up being the wealthy person. But you would think, well, the money would be worth so little to me as a wealthy person, I'm willing to take the risk because it would be a big gain if I'm born the poor person. Okay, so that's Rawls' argument in favor of redistribution. And again, these arguments can be applied in many cases. When I think about the workforce, would I like for the workforce to be more equal for men and women? Let me say, me personally, right now, it's in my interest to have a workforce that, well, let's suppose it's in my interest to have a workforce where men get paid more than women, okay? Because I'm a man, right? Forgetting the other arguments. And in particular, what occurs to me is that actually I want competent colleagues, which means that half the people who would potentially be good colleagues, good coworkers, are women. That's this argument up here. about economic efficiency? Okay, forget about that. Just everything else the same. Right now, I would like for men to be paid more than women. But if I were to take a step back and say, well, what if I don't know if I'm going to be born a man or a woman? Would I want for there to be a more equal workplace? Would I want for women to have the same rights as men? And to that, my answer would be yes. Okay? And we could extend that argument to almost any policy. Now, moving on. I've given some arguments in favor of redistribution. I want to give a couple of arguments against. Okay, so. Okay. So why might we want an unequal society? Or why might we want to do little to make society more equal? Does anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
Create competition.
Okay, inequality creates competition? Is that?
I don't know. That's what I meant.
That's what you meant, and that would be my number one thing. Inequality is a motivator. Yes? If everyone in society took home the same income, regardless of how hard they worked, where is your incentive to work hard? Where is your incentive to invent new things? As a matter of fact, maybe all of economic behavior is motivated by inequality. People want to make more money, get more resources. That's why they engage in economic behavior. So inequality is a motivator. People engage in the economy or engage in economic activity to better themselves. Okay? And the more unequal society is, the bigger the returns from working hard. So yes, I would say that is really the top thing on my list, is that inequality causes competition, or it drives people to work hard. It drives us to do everything we do. Okay, so does that sound good? Okay, and now even more than that, again, there's so many topics I wish I could discuss further. It impacts immigration. Okay. What is the cliche about immigration to America? People come to America because it is a land of blank. Opportunity, yeah? Okay. And what they mean is opportunity to improve yourself financially or economically. Okay, right? So this is something that impacts immigration. Generally, skilled labor flows to inequality. Right? People with skills want to go to places where there is an unequal distribution of wealth. Do you understand the logic behind that? Right? If you're skilled, you want to go to a place where you get the highest premium or pay for your skill. Okay. You want, and this is a problem for some European countries in the reverse order. There's a brain drain, is the term, from European countries that have a fairly equal distribution of wealth. Okay? It's nice for people at the bottom end of the distribution, the less skilled workers, but the highly educated and skilled professionals recognize that they can get paid more by moving to a country where there's a more unequal distribution of wealth. Okay? This also drives immigration from Latin America. And maybe this is different from what you might imagine. As I've probably mentioned on the first day of class, prior to living in North Carolina, I lived in Mexico for a few years. And in part, that was because of my interest in the Mexican labor market. A substantial phenomenon for Mexican workers is coming to the U.S. to earn money. Okay? And in many cases, in some places where there are few opportunities for jobs in Mexico, if you are a hardworking, especially young man, between the ages of 18 and 45 or so, that is what you do if you want to support your family. Migrating to the U.S., earning money, is how you support your family. And it's not at all like I hate to bring up legality. It's not the criminal people. It's the people who want to support their families and are willing to work hard to support their families or make money for themselves who migrate to the U.S. Okay? So in some ways, it is skilled labor if you think of like working hard and being motivated to earn money as the skill that those immigrants are bringing to the U.S. Okay? They're not coming to the U.S. to be lazy. They're coming to the U.S. to earn money. In many cases, send that money back home. As I said, many have families, parents, wives, children that they support in Mexico. And again, sort of imagine your perhaps stereotype of a Mexican immigrant in the U.S. More often than not, it is a youngish man, okay? And they want to go back to Mexico. Okay, so I bring that up as like actually income inequality attracts people who want to work hard, who want to earn money, who want to engage in the economy. Okay, so there are two things. First, income inequality is a motivator, but also it attracts people who want to work hard. Okay, now a second argument against redistribution is really property rights. Okay. So some of us were born privileged, like me. I'm a pink-skinned, English-speaking man, and everything works out in my favor. Okay. What did I do to deserve this? Nothing. Okay. It's just a nice privilege I have. Other people are different. Maya, I'm going to pick on you. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Okay, because I notice a couple of things about you. Your skin is darker than mine, and you're presumably identify as female. Things are not going to be as easy for you as they are for me. And I think we both agree on that. Should society do things that advantage you at my expense? Well, I gave some arguments in favor of that. The argument I'm going to give against it is society, the government has no right to take away this privilege from me, that even though I didn't earn it, it's mine now. I was born with it. And the government doesn't have the right just to take away my stuff. Okay, Stephanie, okay, you argued with me a lot last week. Do you understand this perspective? I think this was some of your arguments as well, is that that was value of life, but the transaction should be consensual. And unless I volunteer to give up my privilege, it's mine, it belongs to me. I recognize, again, I did nothing to deserve this, okay? I recognize it's unfair that being a pink-skinned man, I have a better life than a dark-skinned woman, okay? But again, no one has the right to take that away from me. That's a very selfish attitude, right? Okay, we get that. And it sounds horrible when I say it that way. But I would challenge you to think whether you might agree with it in some ways. Here's something to think about. Okay, my wife was born with some visual impairments, and one of her problems is the cornea of her eyes. That's the part, the outside, like glassy part, is cloudy, both of her eyes. She was born that way. She did nothing to deserve it. Probably almost all of us here were born with clear corneas that function well. Okay, and we did nothing to deserve that. Should the government have the right to cut out your cornea to transfer to someone who was born without that? Okay? Should the government have the right to take away, like, again, do surgery on you to just say, you know, oh, you have 2 working kidneys, there's someone who's going to die if that person doesn't get a kidney transplant. We are taking your kidney from you. We're cutting it from your body and giving it to that person. How would you feel about that? I mean, again, you might think, I mean, so like when I present that thought experiment, your reaction might be, no, that's my body. You can't take away my body without my permission. You can't perform surgery on me. You can't impair, or the government shouldn't be allowed to impair my vision to help out someone else. Okay? I mean, realize, when I talk about cutting out your cornea, that means you are going to have cloudy vision in one eye for the rest of your life. It's not a fun thing. Okay. Now, do you understand this perspective? This is more or less the same defense that people give of economic privilege, is that maybe they did nothing to deserve it. Maybe they recognize that society is unequal. However, it remains their property, and governments do not have the right to take property from people without their consent. Okay? And you know, the example that I tried to plant in your head to maybe get you to understand that perspective is, imagine it's not your economic privilege, but it's your physical privilege in some way. That the government were to decide it's going to handicap people against their will to assist people who are born without those privileges or without that health. Okay, so do you kind of see that perspective? Okay, I mean, this is, I think for many people who defend privilege, this is the way that they think. And regardless of whether you agree with what I'm saying, I think it's useful for you to have this perspective when you engage with those people, okay? And by the way, when I discuss these arguments, I'm not necessarily giving my perspective on anything. I'm giving a variety of different perspectives for you all to understand how other people think and some of the reasoning behind the ways that they act. Okay, so, yeah, okay. So I think that wraps up most of my discussion about arguments for and the arguments against inequality. There might be one more against, okay. It's this question of, when we say equality, what does that mean? And there are generally two concepts of equality. One is equality. By the way, does anyone want to help me with these? Okay. Has anyone heard the distinction between two ideas of equality? Equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity. Okay. Equality of outcome means that we are trying to accomplish we are trying to equalize the final result, okay, in terms of income, for example. Okay, so to ensure that every family takes home the same amount of income. Okay, now equality of opportunity is not that everyone has the same final result. It's that everyone has the same potential to accomplish the final result. Because the problem with equality of outcome is that outcomes depend on really two things: opportunities and choices. Yeah. One person might have more income than another, well, in part because they were born male, they were born to more educated parents who passed down education to them. Some of the things are like they have different opportunities to earn income, but another thing is people make different choices. One person might choose to work harder than another to make more income. So equality of outcome, like how much money you actually the outcomes in terms of income, the outcomes of income, okay, those words seem contradictory. Okay, the outcomes for income depend on these two things. And when we redistribute money that comes from choices, we take away the motivation to engage in those activities. Okay, so equality of opportunity is to ensure that everyone has the same potential to earn income. And so the final results might be different for you and me. If we make different decisions about, for example, how hard we want to work, what careers we want to select, Okay, so you get the difference? Okay. And so probably in many cases, if you ask people, well, what is it that we really want for society? Equality of outcomes or equality of opportunities? It seems like, oh, well, what we really want are equality of opportunities. Provide everyone with, sometimes it's described as a level playing field, okay? Instead of just deciding, so if we make a comparison to a sports game, one thing that would certainly favor one team over another is if the playing field is somehow set up so that balls roll downhill, soccer balls roll downhill into one team's net. Okay. Now, equality of opportunity would be along the lines of, at the end of any soccer game, we just declare it a tie. Okay? Doesn't matter how many goals your team scored, how many goals the other team scored. It's just a tie. Everyone's a winner. But equality of opportunity is to ensure that all the circumstances are equivalent for the two teams, and then the difference comes down, the outcome of the game comes down to who worked harder to win the game. Okay, so it seems like equality of opportunity is really what we want. If we want equality, we want to, and maybe for a practical definition, equality of opportunity means removing arbitrary, like irrelevant, obstacles in life or with income in the labor force. Okay, so we don't have policies that just arbitrarily favor people of one skin color over another, just because we like that skin color. Arbitrary means it's irrelevant, okay? Or just policies that are, like, for no good reason, favor one gender over the other. Okay. A challenge with achieving equality this way, a challenge with equality of opportunity is that it can be expensive. Okay, I'll put a question mark there. I mean, to really ensure that everyone has the same opportunity to succeed in the labor force, and the same opportunity to accomplish like any educational outcome, we might need to intervene in people's lives very early, okay? Because most of us here were born with much better circumstances than the average person. Probably almost all of us had parents who went to college. We had parents who promoted like educational activities from the time we were 6 months old. Our parents encouraged us to succeed in school, in athletics, in extracurricular activities. We sort of had all of those things from the beginning. Now, this is a generalization, but it's true of most people at universities and true of most people at good universities especially. Okay, what would it take to ensure that other people who are born without those same advantages have an equal opportunity to end up at a university like Elon, okay? Where you need to perform academically, in extracurriculars, in sports, well enough to be accepted to Elon University or another university. It would take a lot of effort to intervene in people's lives, and our intervention options are limited. And what's the best tool that society has for equalizing opportunities? It's really education. It's the educational system. So it would require putting a lot of resources into people who come from less advantaged backgrounds very early in education, okay? To bring them to the level where by first grade, those students from less advantaged backgrounds can compete on par with the people who come from advantaged backgrounds. So it can be expensive. And we can generalize this to other things, like ensuring that workforces are equal for men and women can be difficult. You know, the COVID pandemic has placed a disproportionately large burden on female workers. Okay? Why? Because probably if we trace it back, it goes back to some social expectations about women take care of kids. So if we want to ensure that women have the same opportunity to succeed during, this past year, we would have to do something to correct for the idea or the expectation that women will take care of children if something happens. Women are responsible for their homeschooling, or mothers are more responsible for homeschooling. If either parent has to leave the workforce due to COVID, that it will more likely be the mother or the female. Again, we have to do something about these societal expectations, and it's hard to imagine what policies would equalize things. An interesting policy is, I'll just mention this, Sweden, until about 2000, parents could take a combined 2 years of parental leave when a child was born, okay? By law, okay, very nice. So like maternity leave, but both fathers and mothers could take these 2 years, and it could be split between them. Okay, no surprise, more women took more leave than men. So the policy was changed. Fathers and mothers were required to take the same amount of parental leave. Okay? And this is something that led to more equal earnings between men and women, okay? As well as policies in workforces or like in jobs that were more accommodating toward working parents, okay? Another potential barrier to women succeeding in the workplace is that policies don't favor working parents, right? And if the parent responsible for the children is usually female, the burden falls on women. So again, this policy of requiring equal parental leave led to more equal earnings and policies, or let's say family-friendly policies. Okay. So, but it takes creativity and, in this case, a fairly substantial policy. All right. Got it? Okay. So this is,